When Emma first said it, I thought she was joking. We were sitting at the dinner table, candles flickering low between us, the kind of evening where I imagined reconnecting after weeks of tension. I reached across to touch her hand, searching for closeness, and she pulled away with a small sigh. Then she looked me straight in the eye and said, "Once a month is fine, John. That's all I need." Her words hit me harder than I let on. Once a month? That's what our marriage had become to her. A rationed allowance, like intimacy was some utility bill she barely wanted to pay? I nodded at the time, pretending to understand, but inside something fractured. A husband shouldn't feel like he's begging for affection. For weeks afterward, I tested her statement, silently waiting for her to notice the distance she had created. Days passed where I avoided her touch. I stopped leaning in for a kiss when I left for work. When she dressed up for a dinner with friends, I didn't compliment her. I simply became what she asked for. A man who showed up once a month. At first, Emma didn't notice. She was wrapped up in her own world. Brunches, her fitness classes, long phone calls with her sister where she laughed like a teenager again. But as the weeks dragged on, something shifted. She started asking why I was always quiet, why I no longer reached for her in bed, why I worked late instead of coming home early. "Is something wrong, John?" she asked one night, her voice tentative. I almost laughed at the irony. Wrong? Everything was wrong. But I reminded myself, I was only living by her rules. She wanted intimacy once a month? Fine. Then my marriage, my presence, my care would also arrive once a month. The first time I packed a bag and stayed at my brother's for a week, Emma's face was pale when I returned. She asked no questions, just watched me silently as I unpacked. The second time she finally broke. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded. I stared at her, bitterness flooding my chest. "I'm only giving you what you said you wanted." Her lips parted in shock, as though she hadn't expected her own words to echo back so loudly. Emma tried to laugh it off at first, as if I were the one being dramatic. "John, come on, you know I didn't mean it like that," she said, forcing a smile. But her eyes darted nervously, betraying a fear she couldn't hide. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. "You said once a month is enough. I'm respecting that. I didn't realize you'd be upset when I matched your effort." That silenced her. She opened her mouth, then shut it, her hands twisting in her lap. For years, I had been the one chasing her attention, the one planning date nights, the one reminding her that marriage requires more than cohabitation. But now, by doing exactly as she requested, I had turned the mirror back on her. Weeks turned into months, and the atmosphere in our home grew colder. Emma began lingering around me, offering half-hearted hugs, making excuses to sit beside me on the couch. It was almost pitiful. When she touched my arm one evening, whispering, "I miss us," I simply replied, "I'll see you on the 15th, as though we were scheduling a doctor's appointment. The color drained from her face. "That's cruel," she whispered. "Cruel?" I repeated, my voice low but steady. Cruel is a wife treating intimacy like a chore. Cruel is a husband feeling unwanted in his own home. "I didn't write these rules, Emma, you did." For the first time, she had no retort. The power dynamic had shifted. She was the one waiting, hoping, longing, while I remained detached, unyielding. I could feel the frustration building in her. How she lingered in doorways, how she tried to initiate conversations that died in the silence between us. One Saturday morning, she confronted me outright. "John, this isn't working. I can't stand this distance." I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized how much of our marriage had been built on me overcompensating for her lack of effort. And now, when she finally reached for me, it was only because she feared losing control. "This," I said quietly, "is exactly what I've lived with for years. Now you know how it feels." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a brief moment, I almost softened. But the memory of countless lonely nights, of the way she dismissed my needs with a careless shrug, kept me firm. Emma had taught me how to live without closeness. Now she was learning the same lesson, one painful day at a time. The tension between us became unbearable. Meals were eaten in silence, conversations reduced to necessities about bills, groceries, or schedules. What once was a home felt more like a boarding house where two strangers merely coexisted. Emma tried small gestures, making my favorite coffee in the mornings, placing her hand on mine at dinner, even dressing up one evening without occasion. But my responses remained measured, distant, almost transactional. One night, as I was preparing to head to bed, she stood in the doorway, blocking my path. "John, please," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I don't want this. I don't want us to be like this." I studied her. The woman I had once adored so deeply. "Then why?" I asked evenly. "Did you set the bar so low? You told me once a month was fine. That's what you offered me. That's what you thought I deserved." She pressed her lips together, eyes glistening. "I didn't realize what I was doing to you. I thought you'd always try no matter what." That confession stung more than any rejection. "So you expected me to carry everything? The affection, the effort, the pursuit, all of it?" I shook my head slowly. "That's not a marriage, Emma. That's servitude." Her tears finally broke free, streaming down her cheeks as she whispered, "I took you for granted." The admission hung heavy in the air, but it did little to thaw the ice I'd built around my heart. For years, I had craved her attention, only to be dismissed with excuses or half-hearted compromises. Now, standing before me, she was the one begging for scraps of affection, and I could not summon the will to give them freely. Weeks passed, and the cracks widened. Friends began to notice. At gatherings, Emma would cling to me, laughing too loudly, touching my arm as if to prove something to the world. Behind closed doors, however, her frustration boiled. "You're punishing me," she accused one evening, her tone sharp. "I'm showing you what our marriage feels like through my eyes," I replied calmly. "If that feels like punishment, maybe you should ask yourself why." She stared at me, speechless, her face pale with the weight of realization. It was in that moment she finally understood. I had stopped being the desperate husband yearning for scraps of love. I had become a man who refused to settle for half a marriage. And in that shift, Emma began to realize something terrifying. That the indifference she had taught me might be the very thing that destroyed us for good.